BraveMaker Show is hosted by Tony Gapperstone. Thanks for tuning in. It's showtime.
Hey, happy, what is it? September, mid-September. This is Tony Gapperstone. This is episode 207 of the BraveMaker Show. My pronouns are he, him, his. And I'm a filmmaker and actor, screenwriter, director, living in the San Francisco Bay Area, currently in Redwood City, California. I've got a white shirt on today with my yellow glasses, a black hat. I'm in my BraveMaker studio, striped wall, pink letters, green faux wall. And I'm really stoked to talk to our special guest today about costumes and costume design and storytelling through that medium. So welcome to episode number 207, the Emmy Nominated Costume Designer, Salvador Perez. Welcome, Salvador.
Hi, Tony. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for being here. Salvador, I think I started following you on social media maybe 4 years ago. I don't think I had made my feature film yet. I made my first feature film in 2021, micro budget indie. And I think I just kind of have been following you since the Mindy project, which we'll talk about today. And I said in a comment like, oh my gosh, I need you to design costumes for me someday. And I just followed your career, kind of bantered back and forth. At one point, you followed me back. I was like, oh, cool. And then I started saying a little comment on different things, slid into DMs. Hey, can you come on the podcast? I think this was earlier 2023, like even before the strike. And you're like, yeah, I'm traveling, I'm doing this and that, but we'll do it eventually. And then here we are, mid-September, 130 days into the Writers Guild strike and 2 months of SAG strike. But this is the time to have Salvador Perez.
Taking advantage of some time off.
Well, hey, why don't you introduce yourself? We'd like to do pronouns and visual description for those who are listening.
I am Salvador Perez. I'm a Latino costume designer. I go use the pronouns of he, him. I am, what am I wearing today? A blue shirt, a purple and blue scarf, and brown glasses.
I did not have my hat on before, but when Salvador, who you have like this signature iconic hat, I was like, I'm gonna put my hat on too, so I can feel part of the crew here. But yeah, let's jump in. I'm really, a huge fan of film and of TV and a lot of your work. I'm a huge Mindy Project fan, like one of my favorite shows. So I just want to know, this is backing up. What is your origin story? How did you even become a costume designer? I
totally fell into film. I thought I was going to be a fashion designer. I thought I was going to be Calvin Klein and have a brand. Okay. And I had a very early and smart college counselor when I was in high school who was like, what do you want to do with life? And I'm like, I want to be a fashion designer. And I grew up in a small farm town near Fresno in California. And she's like, well, do you really prepare for that? I'm like, well, I don't know. She's like, well, we have sewing classes. I'm putting you in a sewing class. And I'm like, I can't take a sewing class. I'm a boy. But she was like, we're going to put you in sewing classes. And so I actually had 4 years of high school sewing. And I had a great home ec teacher, which we don't have those anymore, who loved that that there was a boy in the class and that I was proficient at what I did. And she's like, there's a school coming through called FITM, the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising. They're going to have a seminar. You should go to it. And so I went to the seminar and was fascinated because, it's a small farm town. There was nobody to talk fashion with. And I went and applied to FITM and I got in. And it was my introduction to fashion. And then I started sewing for like random clients. I worked in retail in LA at a store called Aardvarks on Melrose, and I met costume designers. And one day somebody's like, we need somebody to sew. And I'm like, I sew. And I just thought, well, I'm gonna sew until I have my fashion line. And then somebody offered me a film, and then I was working on films and building costumes for films, and I was on Titanic. And one of my bridal clients, Tracy Edmonds, who was married to Kenny Babyface Edmonds, I had done some gowns for her, and I did her wedding. And she's like, "We're producing a movie called Soul Food. Do you want to design it?" And I'm on Titanic, running the workroom, the biggest movie in the world. And I left to go design Soul Food. And again, this is all temporary until I have my fashion line. And now, 20 some odd years later, I was the president of the Costume Designers Guild, and I have my second Emmy for costume design. So I fell into film.
It's amazing.
Film and television.
So do you still feel like the brand, the line is a goal someday? Do you still feel like that's something you want to do?
I mean, I really love what I do as a costume designer because I'm storytelling, as opposed to trying to try to deal with the public and their wants and needs. And when I designed the Mindy project, I designed a line of jewelry, I designed a line of coats, and I got to design contemporary clothes for Mindy. So I think I've gotten that out of my system. I still think about it, because when the Mindy project was hot, everybody was like, let's do a fashion line. But, a fashion line takes months, and I was full-time designer on a show. So there was very, very rarely time to do it. And I was lucky the whole, 6 seasons of Mindy, I did a film in between each season. So there was rarely time off. And I don't know, I sort of think like, as I'm looking into my retirement years, do I want to then have a business and do retail? I don't know. It's a possibility.
So Mindy project, I feel is like this, I don't know, is it golden? Is it peak TV? I don't know. I know it like had a lot of challenges. It went from one place to another, but it was like the little engine that could. And Mindy really broke out, from herself in that show. And she was, her character was known as the like fashionable OBGYN. And
it was, I was in the middle of designing Liz and Dick with Lindsay Lohan. It was a crazy show. And I got this call to do the Mindy project. I asked my agent, what's it about? She's like, oh, it's about an OBGYN office. I'm like, I don't want to do a medical show. Scrubs, no thanks. She's like, well, Mindy has specifically called you, and Anna Camp is in it, who I had just worked with on Pitch Perfect 1. I'm like, oh, I love Anna. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll take the meeting. And so I go to the meeting, and I said, is this a show about an OB/GYN office? And she's like, well, no. She's like, I love fashion, and I want it very fashion forward. And she's like, I'm not a sample size, so it's hard for me to find fashion in my that works for me. And I'm like, oh, we could build it. And we had this great meeting, and I'm like, I'm not doing a TV show. I'm a film. And then they called, and they made me an offer, and I was like, nah, no thanks. And then they made me a really great offer, and I thought, okay, I like this. And little did I know that it would be just an absolute dream job. I mean, Mindy is the ultimate collaborator. I mean, she just loved fashion as much as I did. And we, to this day, I mean, she still sends me a link to a dress she saw on the runway, or, it's just in our nature. We love talking about clothes. And I got to sort of fulfill my fashion design dream working for her. And, then I've done several shows for her. I did Never Have I Ever. I did Champions. I did Sex Lives of College Girls. She sent me to London to do Four Weddings at the Funeral, which, second to the Mindy project, is my second favorite job ever. Like, I love what I got to do on both the Mindy project and Four Weddings at the Funeral. It was just the ultimate as a costume designer to do contemporary fashion, but in a way where I got to build and design. It was amazing.
Champions is a show that I'm so mad went away. Champions was such a good show. If you have not heard of that show, I'm sure it's out there somewhere. Y'all go check it out. It's so good. It starred Josie Toda, and I just the writing on that show is so smart and fun.
And Anders Holm and Andy Favre, it was a great cast. I think it just didn't find its footing.
Yeah,
the studios were notorious to like not give shows a chance for the audience to find them.
That's right. Well, I want to talk a little bit more about the collaboration because it's so cool and enviable. I'm a director. I have one feature film under my belt, a bunch of short films. I want to write and direct and showrun television, all that kind of stuff. And I think there's something really beautiful in this relationship that you have with Mindy. The fact that you've been on almost all of her projects, right? If not all of them. And I just wonder, like, what are some of the best practice? Obviously, you hit it off, and there was a chemistry, and there was a connection, and she requested you. But what would you say to other costume designers and directors about how to foster that kind of collaboration? What does it look like? What are the do's and don'ts and shoulds and coulds?
I mean, I've been very fortunate that the people that I've come across in my career hire me over and over again. I mean, Rob Thomas, I met on Veronica Mars, and I did several shows for Rob, and Party Down and Odd Behavior, and I worked with him a little on iZombie, and he always calls me, and the nicest compliment Rob gave me, he's like, "I've always appreciated you, Sal, but I appreciate you more when you're not there." I think it's about a work ethic, and I give 150%, and I think that people take our jobs for granted, but there's nothing better than working with somebody who you have a chemistry with, and there's that sort of, they don't, like, I know that the producers that hire me know that it's going to look fabulous, and they're not going to have to worry about it. It's like, that's one department they have to worry about. I mean, again, it's Mindy Kaling, it's Rob Thomas, Elizabeth Banks. I've met on Zach and Mary Make a Porno. When she started to direct, I did her shorts, and I did a couple projects with her, and then she brought me on to Pitch Perfect, and I did 3 of those with her. And actually, Elizabeth Banks recommended me to Ann Fletcher, who I did Hocus Pocus with. So I think that you need to be the best version of yourself, and that producers will want to work with you and keep working with you because you deliver. I think that we can get very jaded in this business, and I love what I do. It's, the fact that they pay me is icing on the cake, because I love that storytelling through costumes. And I think that it's like, you realize that, if you're a good person and fun to be around, people are going to hire you over and over again.
I've heard you in other interviews talk about that idea of storytelling, which I love. BraveMaker is all about how stories can change the world, brave stories. And I would love to kind of hear a little bit about, I mean, obviously color is such a big thing, and style. I teach an acting class as well, and we're talking about how the first thing you see on a character is what they're wearing, right? Where did they get it? What does it say anything about their class, about their care, about what they look like? And so I wonder if you can share some of the process that you go about, like what are the questions that you ask? I'm sure it starts with the script, but anything you can talk about with that process of creating a character's look.
I mean, you read the script, and then there's 20 versions of the character. And so then you sit down with the director or the showrunner on a television show, and then the actors, and then you sort of like, you decipher the character. Like, it's a mom. Well, whose mom? Is she a hip mom? Is she a working class mom? Is she there's just, and it's the subtle details you put into clothes. It's not, you can put something there's a million versions of a white t-shirt and jeans. Are they fitted? Are they baggy? Is the t-shirt loose? Is it V-neck? Is it, it's those subtle details of storytelling. And I remember, like, when I did Castle, and I didn't do the pilot for Castle. It was done in New York, and then they brought me on to do take over the show. And I took Stana Kotick to the mall, because you can bring racks and racks of clothes in, but it's so much easier to take the actor to the store, which you don't always get to do. I did the same thing with Kristen Bell and Veronica Mars. She was an unknown actress back then, so we went to the mall. But it's interesting to see what they gravitate to. And then with Stana, we were trying to figure out the character. We wanted her to be a little fashionista, but she couldn't be too fashionable because she was a police officer. And we found this great hunter green leather trench coat. And we put it on. We're like, oh, it's very 70s detective. She's like, yeah, it's Serpico. And we both lit up, we're like, Serpico, that's your inspiration for this character. And then we went from there. It's like what inspired us for this character. And then I sort of make a Bible for each character. Like, on Castle, in California, in LA, everybody wears denim, and New Yorkers just dress better. So I sort of made this rule that only Castle wore denim because he was a writer turned detective. But like all the detectives wore slacks and suit coats, and they didn't wear jeans. And we're like, why we get in a fight with actors because they wanted to wear jeans? I'm like, no, only Castle's wearing jeans. But I wanted to give backstories. Right now, you're showing Four Weddings and a Funeral. Those characters are so defined. You give everybody a backstory and then build a closet for that backstory. So I don't just buy a perfect dress, but I'm like, where would this character have found this dress? How would the color they chose, how it's fit, how it's taken care of? And I do that same backstory for even my day players. And the Mindy project, it was so nice because once the show was a huge hit, the actors would come into the show, the day players, and they'd be like, I'm so excited to work with you. I can't wait see what you're gonna put me in. And then I would give the day players a backstory, like who they are, what their families were, and they're like, this is so much detail. I'm like, because I can't just put you in a suit. What suit is it? How does it fit? It's storytelling through costumes and clothing. And that's the fun part of costume design. It's just like you don't just arbitrarily throw a suit on them. There has to be a reason for everything you put on an actor.
Gosh, I love this. I love this so much. And again, it reminds me of the collaboration. So when I know we have a lot of people who listen and watch this podcast who are screenwriters. So when you're writing a character, you need to be thinking about the future collaboration with the costume designer. What are some clues that you can give the costume designer in that script that's going to help them create, design, shop for that character, right? And same thing with like the hair and the makeup and all that kind of stuff. It really, really is exciting. But when you're obviously at a really high level, like you are working on these amazing films. Talk about Hocus. Right, exactly. But so I want to go back. I want to go back and kind of talk a little bit about maybe before when you first got started, because I work at a small micro budget level, and I have had really great costume and wardrobe designers and people who come on our sets who work at our small low budget, who are working their way to get to where you are. What are some of the things that when you look back or maybe talk to your old self that helped get you, helped you sustain that career or build in that career? What are the things that you did that, when you didn't have the budget, when you didn't have the Mindy Kaling potential connections from a low budget or entry level position of someone who wants to do this kind of work that you do now?
I think that as a collaborator, it's about listening. And a lot of times the average person doesn't have a fashion vocabulary. And it's funny because like Rob Thomas is like a jeans and t-shirt kind of a guy. And he knew what he didn't like, but he didn't know how to describe what he did like. So in the beginning of the process, you know how to show them the world. Like I'll go through and, VERONICA MARS had, 7 changes in the pilot. I probably showed them 50 versions of outfits. We did more goth, more punk. And we took things like the whole look for VERONICA MARS was not scripted. As per the storyline, she was a kid who the family did well. And then, through drama, she became, sort of the outcast, and she had been raped. And she had armor. And he talked about her armor. And so to me, armor meant putting up a facade because she couldn't literally wear armor, but her whole sort of badass leather jackets, sort of tough chick persona was to me armor that she put on. And so I took his note about her having armor mentally and did it visually through her clothes. Like the outfits that she put on were like, don't mess with me. Because they called her fans marshmallows because she was really soft inside. And she was a petite blonde girl, but she had to put on armor. And so Chris, one of the first shows I did that fashion took off was VERONICA MARS. And the whole look of that show was my concept. I mean, it was never scripted. They never talked about it. And a lot of times you get a script, and as a screenwriter, it's a very brief description. And as the costume designer, I came in and I fleshed out those characters. I defined those characters, and I gave them each a backstory, and I gave them something that was tangible. And this was before social media, before the internet was huge. And I always listen to your PAs. I had a PA who was like, there's a whole blog about your costumes. I'm like, what's a blog? And she showed me where because a lot of TV shows, they will wear an outfit and then you never see it again and it's gone. And I'm like, well, Veronica is poor. She doesn't have that kind of disposable income. So she's going to reuse her pieces. And so I would reuse pieces, and somebody put up a blog and said, oh, they used the leather jacket again, or, oh, they used those boots again. And somebody was actually tracking when I reused pieces, which I thought was fascinating. And then I was having a conversation with Rob, and he's like, "Oh, you use that jacket again?" Yeah, I said, "Look, I've used pieces over, but in the 2 seasons we've done, I've never repeated an outfit." He's like, "What?" I said, "I've never repeated an outfit in 2 seasons." So she can change 20 times in an episode. And back then you were doing 26 episodes. So he's like, "She's had that many he's like, "We don't give you the budget." I'm like, "I know, I just mix it up. I've never put the same shirt, jacket, pant, shoe combination on her ever." And he loved that I was able to take a small amount of clothes and reuse them over and over again to make new outfits. So she's still, because you just didn't want to have this, she's supposed to be low income, but she wouldn't have changed her outfit every episode like the rich kids would have.
Mm-hmm. That is so smart. And I remember that. I remember that conversation in that blog, because I remember thinking there's something really cool and sustainable about that as a designer who's mindful about the environment, about clothes. And, fashion can also have that kind of shady side where it's like people don't care and they throw things out, but that felt like it was actually this really intentional part of the character. But it also was like, oh, we're not just, spending a ton of money and throwing these things out. Like, no, like sometimes we do as human beings, or the entertainment industry can be accused of. I just thought that was super thoughtful. I totally remember that. I think that is really a cool
that goes back to not
legacy.
Having the huge budgets. Like on the Mindy project, obviously I had a nice budget, but on VERONICA Mars, it was a new show. It was on the CW. We didn't have those kind of budgets. So it was about being smart with clothes. And also, like, I am the king of what's on the sale rack. Because if I'm going to buy a Prada skirt, I want the Prada skirt on sale. Any monkey can go to Neiman's and buy the expensive version, but finding it on sale or, finding it at Ross was more fun. And so I'm all about, digging through the sale racks first, finding some treasures, finding something that was vintage. It's being creative with money. And I think, again, there's some new designers who think that going to Neiman's and buying expensive clothes is talented. No, anybody can do that. It's trickier to do it on a budget. Mm-hmm. And it shows your creativity.
Yeah. And I heard you talk about that too. Like, some people even just think a wardrobe designer or costume designer is just about shopping, which is right. It's more than that. It's design.
Less than 50% of my job is shopping.
Yeah.
There's finance, there's marketing, there's psychology, trying to an actor is feeling bloated that day, having a bad mood. They're not wanting to wear blue. It's like, okay. There's so much more of my job is human interaction than actual shopping.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that partnership with actors? I mean, you are firsthand, you're dressing them sometimes, you're literally handing them the clothes.
It's first time the actors become the character is in my fitting room. The first time they see themselves because I think it's not just clothes. That's why I'm a costume designer. I'm not a stylist. I'm a costume designer. What the actor wears is a costume, whether it's a t-shirt and jeans or it's Marie Antoinette, it's a costume. But the first time the actor is in the costume and embodies it is in my fitting room. And, we meet them, we see them in their underwear, they come to a set. And if you're the biggest actor in the world, you're still on a set of 300 people and you don't know anybody, but they know the costume department because they spent hours with us in fittings. And there's just that familiar face. So there's a rapport with costumes that doesn't happen with other departments, which is, when you come like the Costume Designer Guild Awards, the talent that comes to our award show shows the love they have for us because people love coming to our award show. They love supporting us. And it's building relationships. And I mean, the nicest thing, like, with Rebel Wilson, I worked with Rebel Wilson since Pitch Perfect 1. I've done 3 Pitch Perfects with her and 2 films with her. And there's just the trust. She knows that if I'm there, she's going to look good because I've proven to her over 13 years that I always make her look great. And, and I think as a costume designer, I started as a stitcher. I was a stitcher. I ran workrooms. I was an assistant costume designer, and then I was a costume designer. So unlike most costume designers, I was a builder. So I see an outfit and I immediately know how to fix it. I know that when you buy a suit at a store, the sleeves are never going to fit you. They're always too big. Like, I don't know what human being fits into an off-the-rack suit. It's about alterations. And I'll take something very basic and recut it to them, and they look amazing in it. I think, which is why I got along so great with Mindy, is that clothes just fit her so beautifully. And she had that trust that, I can make her look good. And I love that with Mindy, we worked together for, again, 12, 13 years. even when I'm not there, she now has a monthly appointment with her seamstress because she knows that clothes have to be fit and she looks better in them.
That's rad. I love it. All right. Well, I want to talk about Hocus Pocus, these witches, these amazing costumes. I'm holding a article from August from the Hollywood Reporter talking about your most current Emmy nominations, which is super cool. So congratulations on that. Hocus Pocus 2, we've got new characters. I'm a huge Sam Richardson fan, by the way. And I was reading about how you were creating his costume and the way that, again, storytelling was so prevalent. You were taking little things and nods to the first film. So, I mean, this is obviously a huge undertaking. What, outside of the making of the wardrobe and the costumes, what is like something you have learned yourself as a creative collaborator in this space after being a part of this film, such an iconic film with these iconic, stars?
As costume designers in Hollywood, you hear about projects all the time. And I remember when I first heard rumblings of them doing a reboot, I told my agent, I'm like, if you ever hear they're looking for costume designer, please put my name in the hat. That was years ago. And I was actually working on senior year with Rebel Wilson and Sam Richardson.
That's a fun film. Film.
And I got a call from, I was at Nordstrom's Rack in Atlanta, Georgia, and my agent called. She's like, you have any interest in doing Hocus Pocus 2? And I'm like, ha, ha, ha. She's like, well, they want to meet with you. I'm like, what? And she's like, yeah, this is like on a Thursday. She's like, can you meet, Tuesday on a Zoom call? And I'm like, sure. And so I spent the entire weekend and I put together this elaborate presentation. And of course, I immediately, I was the president of the Costume Designers Guild for 9 years. And part of the board was Mary Vogt, who designed the original film. So I called up Mary and I'm like, are you interviewing for this? And she's like, I'm like, if you're going to interview, I'm not going to interview against you. She's like, no, I did the first one. I have no interest in coming back to it. And I'm like, okay, well, she's like, you'll be great. And then I sort of talked to her about like where her line concepts, where the characters were. And there's enough out there you can read, but I wanted to talk to her about it. And so I went into the meeting with Lynn Harris and Ann Fletcher. And I just had so much backstory on the characters. And then the meeting was supposed to be on Tuesday, and then they called me like, can you do it on Monday? I'm like, well, thank God I worked all weekend and my presentation's ready. Yes, no problem. And they're like, wait, they're going to travel all day Monday, and they're going to arrive in Boston late, and then you're going to have like a 7 o'clock meeting. I'm like, a 7 o'clock Zoom call on a Monday after they've traveled. They're going to, we hate those meetings because they go nowhere. People are tired. They can't listen to you. We had a 3-hour meeting. Like, it was like we were old friends. And they were so impressed with my knowledge of the characters and my ideas for the new characters. And again, I was recommended by Elizabeth Banks. So it was like, it was just symbiotic. And the next day they called and offered me the job. And again, I was excited and horrified because I'm like, wait, taking on this monumental task of, these beloved characters and having to reinvent them for, 30 years later. And what struck me through it, because these are probably some of the most elaborate costumes I've ever made. I mean, Beth's costumes were so many hands. The fabric was bought and then dyed, and then we had to beat it. But before you could beat it, you had to silk screen it. So then we had to take it to the silk screener, and then from the silk screener went to the beater, and then from the beater went to the cutter fitter. The cutter fitter made it, and then it came to us, and then we had to age it and rhinestone it. And it occurred to me, like, I was using resources that I had built over the last 20 years. Like, had you asked me 10 years ago to design Hocus Pocus, I don't know that I would have been able to design it the way I did now. Like, it took to this part of my career 20 years later to have the knowledge and the experience to build these costumes. So I look at these costumes and they're really the culmination of my career. I have been working in the industry for over 20 years and I was ready to design these costumes. And and again, talk about collaborations. I mean, Lynn Harris and Ann Fletcher, we just understood each other and it was not all yes. I mean, sometimes Anne was like, you went too far. That's not enough, or that's the wrong direction. I mean, like when I first did my Mother Witch costumes, I went more Marie Antoinette. She's like, no, she's spooky. And then I immediately did these illustrations within a couple hours and sent it back to her. She's like, that's it. And that's where I went from it. She's like, it's the bird. And then she showed me the red winged raven, and the red winged raven had those, the bird has those colors on it. She's like, this is the bird. She said, she starts off at. And then, of course, I had all these ideas, and then Disney doesn't allow any animal product on their costumes, so I couldn't use feathers. So I had to come up with a way to make fake feathers, because we couldn't put real feathers on the costume. But it was just, again, it was having the experience of my career to get to that, and then collaborating with, you're talking to these legends. I mean, Bette Midler, Sarah Jessica Parker, Kathy Najimy, who had worn these costumes 30 years ago, and had to wear them again. And that was so much fun to collaborate with them, and then to be able to create, like you're showing Hannah Waddingham. I mean, I had a few months to prepare this, but then I got her like 4 days before she worked. And she was just delightful. Like, I had so much fun. Like, our fittings were hysterical, and she was only on set 2 days, and we just had the best time.
She was only on set 2 days for her role. Wow. In and out, huh?
Yeah, she was in London, came in, fit with us, shot, and left. Wow. But she was so much fun to work with. And, it's a costume that you're making. But the reality is that I've created an icon for Disney that'll live on forever.
Yeah.
I might not cure cancer. I might not, end world peace, but I've created a costume that, and like, nothing pleases me more than to see fans emulate it. And like, somebody just tweeted me, like, they did their version of it for Comic-Con, and I'm like, it was so elaborate. The fact that you can inspire people, and like little things. I remember, like, in West Hollywood, being on the boulevard and seeing a group of people go by in white shirts, pink bow ties, and black tux pants, and I'm like, party down. Like, oh my God. I'm like, I designed those costumes. So it's funny to see the impact that costume designers have. That people, something you came up with so randomly, people that were inspired by, and then decided to wear it on Halloween.
I freaking love Party Down. Sometimes, like, something is so good and so funny, you're like just mad, like, that you're not a part of it. Some people say, I'm mad I didn't create it. I'm like, I just want to be a part of stuff like that because it is so freaking good. But that's got to feel so satisfying to create something that is so ingrained into pop culture that people are dressing up at it at a Comic-Con or Halloween. That's awesome. Can I ask about?
Actually, Rob and Dan called me to do the reboot, and I was still on Hocus Pocus, so I couldn't do it.
The geeking out, or like, do you get that? I mean, I've been around, the people and the stars, and it's like everyone's just like us. We're just humans. But sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so cool, like, that I get to meet these people. How was it, or how is that for you? Are you just kind of like, oh, it's another person I'm stitching?
No, I mean, Bette Midler has seen Hocus Pocus twice. I had seen it 40 times in the last 30 years. So I wasn't just the costumer on the show. I was a fan, getting to live in these characters that I'd, grown up with. And it was a hard show. We were in the dead of winter. It was the height of the pandemic. It was social distancing. Bette was in LA. Sarah was in New York. Kathy was in New York. And I was literally, like, it was easier for me to go to them. So, like, Bette would come to me when she was in LA, but then I would have to fly to New York. And I was just all over the place. And then we were stuck in Rhode Island, which is not Boston. It's Providence, Rhode Island. And it was just like, everything was harder, and I had to do the best work of my career. I mean, I had a phenomenal crew. I mean, Gayla Autumn, the costume supervisor, has been with me for over 20 years. My cutter fitters and my crew from Atlanta that I worked with for years all came to Boston. Again, this goes back to me saying that it took this point I have so many great connections that I brought in a dream team, and we pulled off this amazing design job. And so then a year later, I'm in the swamps of Savannah, dirtying up a costume, and I get a text from a colleague saying, congratulations. And I'm like, for what? And I was like, I forgot it was Emmy morning, and I didn't really think we had a chance because this field is so big.
Yeah.
So a year later, to have poured my heart into a film, to then my peers to recognize me with an Emmy nomination, I don't even need to win. I've won. It's just such a huge honor to even for my peers to recognize these costumes. It's, again, life is great. I can't complain.
That's great. That's great. And good luck. And because of all the strike stuff, the Emmys are now in January, so we'll have to wait even longer.
Yeah, I could have already won or lost an Emmy. I don't know, but it's out of my hands now.
Well, I'd love to talk a little bit about, because speaking of the strikes, this is a really challenging time, and I like to say every week, BraveMaker does stand in solidarity. I'm a SAG-AFTRA member. I am not WGA yet, working my way toward it, but these are hard times. And I've been down to LA a few times to join the picket lines, and I hear the stories, and I have a lot of friends that are in both unions. There are people being edged out right now who, I know people who cannot survive. They cannot. They're finding other jobs. They're moving out. how are you surviving in this time? What is it like for you?
You just said that it was like the 130th day of the strike or whatever. It's not the 130th day. It's the 130th day of the official strike. But work stopped last December. I mean, it's for some people, but they haven't worked in a year.
Yeah.
Look, I've always, even though I'm successful, I still feel I'm new in the business. So I've always put away 6 months of expenses just in case, because it's not even about a strike or a pandemic, but you can go time with it. So I mean, I try to live frugally and I put money aside, but it's been tough, and and what's harder is that, look, I'm a former president of a labor union. I'm still a board member for a labor union, so I fully support solidarity amongst unions. But the problem is that when this strike is over, the writers and the actors will have gained something in their contract. The rest of us have supported them and get nothing except for unemployment and debt. And so it's very hard for us to understand why, when, I just finished Brightheart, which got an interim agreement. The independent producers agreed in advance to everything that the WGA wants. So whatever they achieve, we've already agreed to it. So when people say, well, I don't agree with interim agreements, I'm like, it's helping the cause. It's literally agreeing to what you're asking the studios to do. So I was very blessed that Rebel Wilson called me and said, hey, we're doing this movie. We had 3 weeks to prep it. 3 weeks, because she had a very tight schedule to shoot. And but I was like, great, let's do it. And we made a little money, and I banked some insurance hours because I need my medical coverage. But I'm rare. I mean, there are people who are just suffering through this.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to fight for somebody else when you will end up with nothing from it. But we have to stay in solidarity. And look, I'm not going to take a project with a scab writer. I'm not going to take a project that's not taking care of SAG actors. But it's also very frustrating that nothing's going on. Like, there's wars of words, but there's no negotiating. Nobody is sitting at the table and making this work. Whether the AMPTP, who can call a negotiation, and the writers in SAG are just angry. And it's like, stop being angry and let's use that energy into sitting down as adults and make this work. It's absurd that they've gone this long. Everybody's losing money. And the thing is that now there's no commercials on television. There's no movies in the theater. So now the studios are losing money. I'm not a filmmaker that way. I mean, I'm in a studio head, but I would think that at some point it's like, let's settle down.
Yeah.
Let's keep making movies, because I mean, I just went to go see Barbie, and it was so much fun to sit in a theater and watch a film. Like, I missed that. And I think that the public, after the pandemic, where we didn't have those opportunities, want to go back to do this, but there's nothing to put in the theaters.
It's going to be a huge impact. It's already obviously having a huge impact on people, but just the way that it's going to affect, film and TV for the next year. It's right now, like all the projects that aren't happening, right now, it's going to be like, we're going to be seeing this for quite some time. And, my heart, it goes out to obviously everybody on the front lines, but it's all the other people. It's the craftspeople who are working all the way down the line, like yourself, the hair and makeup people, the florists, the caterers, like everybody is being impacted.
And Hollywood is a film city. So I was getting my barber the other day, and he's like, my business is down to half. The restaurant next door closed. If we are Hollywood, if we're not working, we're not going to the grocery store, we're not going to restaurants, this entire city is affected by it. And if it's not just LA, it's like, I was just in Atlanta. Atlanta's shut down. Studio services at Macy's and Bloomingdale's, they're closing down. It affects, it's the way our industry spreads out is huge in ways that people don't understand. So it's not just the union members. It's all of the people in LA who are suffering.
Well, I hope that, I believe as artists and creative people, there's going to be a way forward. We're going to figure this out somehow. We have to. I don't think we have a choice. This is who we are. We have this calling on our lives to make things, to tell stories, to collaborate. So I'm believing in the good of creativity, y'all out there. Those who are on the picket lines, my hope is when those contracts get to where they need to be and you can get back to work, that there's more collaboration because of the relationships that were built through this really challenging time, and we have better and bigger stories out there to work on together. So Salvador, this is really cool. Honestly, I'm a huge fan of your work. I'm very inspired by your ethos and the way that you navigate, through the collaborations with all the people that you have. It's super inspiring. And I guess the last question I have, because I sense from you like this positive attitude and this hard work ethic, and obviously the creativity, all the things, outside of the strike and the negative impact, there's also a lot of stuff swirling around. Like there's a reckoning happening with toxic behavior on sets and behind the scenes, right? We're seeing all these things being called out, and I'm sure you've seen your fair share of things. How do you, as a creative person, take care of yourself, in the good times and the challenging times? And again, I'm sure you've seen things, you don't have to share about them. This business isn't always known for its kindness toward the people on set below the line. How do you take care of yourself as a creative person?
I mean, I think there's twofold. I think that this actually goes back to the pandemic. Even though I prepared not to work 6 months of the year, I worked all the time. I went job to job to job. I had no breaks. So when the pandemic happened, we shut down, and it was like a forced vacation. And I always was like afraid of retirement. Like, well, I can't retire. What would I do with my time off? Oh my God. I had such a great time not doing anything. It was, I mean, financially it wasn't great, but from an emotional state. So what it taught me is take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so even as I've now gone back to work, I've learned that I'm the costume designer. The costume's designed. I support my crew. Is it ready to go? Do I need to shoot, an action movie, they wear one outfit for days and days and days. Do I need to be there every day? I don't kill myself to work anymore. I work to enjoy it, but I also I go to the doctor. I try to take breaks. It's about work-life balance.
Yeah.
And, I also, you hear these stories about abuse on set and bullying.
Mm-hmm.
Your crew is not going to deliver for you if you bully them or you're mean to them.
Mm-hmm.
And you're only as good as your crew. And my crew some of my crew's been with me 20 years, and we work together because we're friends. And you thank everybody at the end of the day, thank people. It's such an easy, costless thing to tell your crew thank you. And it's amazing to me how people just forget that little act of kindness.
Yeah.
When an actor comes in for a fitting, I thank them. I'm like, hey, thanks for coming. I mean, I know you're busy and you didn't want to come. I mean, Mindy loved fittings. Mindy would have 4 and 5 hour fittings. Most actors hate them, except my fittings because they go well. But I always thank the actor for your time. Thank you for you didn't have to make it so easy. But just thank people every day. Thank the catering guys. When I go to catering, when I'm leaving the catering, I always thank them. Yes, it's their job, but they put extra love and heart into it. It's just thank people every day. It's such a simple act that goes so far and costs you nothing.
Right on. That's a word. That's a good word to end our main segment here. And thank you all for listening. Thank you, Salvador, for being a part of our 207th episode. We're not done though. Let's end with our Brave Faves.
Brave Faves. TV shows, films, books, songs, technology, clothing, podcast, food, and more. These are a few of our favorite people, places, and things. Brave Faves.
All right, so I have been loving Dave season 3, y'all. It is such a fun and funny show. It's just really brilliant and super satirical and poking fun of itself, poking fun of the industry that I love, that we love so much, acting and film and TV and music. So if you have not seen or heard of Dave Bird, he is a rapper who created this persona and his own television show based on his challenge in the nether region. So check it out. It's on Hulu. It's very, very funny. That's my Brave Fave for the week. Salvador, what's yours?
Well, it's funny. I mean, this is not new to everybody else, but it's new to me. I don't get a chance to watch much television.
Mm-hmm.
And I was always aware of Ted Lasso.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I worked at Hannah Waddingham, I watched a couple episodes, but I didn't really sort of sit down and watch it. And I just binge watched all 3 seasons and sat there and bawled and laughed. And what a brilliant show. I mean, again, I was I think I didn't watch it because I'm it's a show about the soccer.
Right.
Or is it not? But
right.
you understand why Hannah won an Emmy, and you understand why it's won so many Emmys. It's such a well-written show, and don't think that it's a show about soccer. It's not. It's a human story. It shows vulnerability and kindness and friendship. And it's just, I'm blown away and saddened that it's over, because it was only 3 seasons and they wrapped it up beautifully. But I'm like, can't you bring it back? Because I need more Ted Lasso.
I agree. And that goes back to that human kindness and that being good to people. That's kind of the core of the whole show. So yeah, I totally agree. Awesome, Sal. Do not go away. Everybody else, thank you so much for watching today. We are really grateful for your support for 207 episodes. If you are somebody who is inclined to become a supporter, we are a nonprofit, and every week we invite you to consider donating, whether it's $5 or $25. You can do that at bravemaker.com/donate. You can also do it right from your phone. Text the word BraveMaker to 44321. That's 44321. Text the word BraveMaker, and you get a link on your phone. And it helps us to do the stream of our podcast every week for our gear, for the renting of our space, for our BraveMaker Academy Acting School, for our film festival we've been doing for the past 5 years. And it also helps us put a little money into the films that we also want to do too. Our feature film, Last Chance Charlene, is available on all the platforms, Apple and Amazon. You can rent Last Chance Charlene. I think it's like $4 right now. We get like 40% of that back into the nonprofit. But we want to do more feature films. And maybe someday we'll get to work with Salvador Perez as our costume designer. So you can help make that happen. Go to bravemaker.com today and check it out. Next week, we have filmmaker Nadine Crocker, who has a new film coming out. We got to support indie filmmakers. A new film coming out called Desperation Road. It's her second feature film starring Garrett Hedlund. It comes out in October in theaters. So Nadine Crocker will be on the show for episode 208 next week. Make sure you subscribe on all the places, BraveMaker.org, especially on YouTube. Salvador Perez, thank you so much for being on. Really cool. You can be following Salvador, and please do, at Salvador Perez Costumes on all the places. On Instagram is where I found him, and I'm going to keep following. And before I go, I say thank you to our producer, Amy Cohen from Austin, Texas. Our intern, Jessica Cohen, is going to take clips from this video right now and edit them up and put them out throughout the whole week so you can hear all the wonderful wisdom that Salvador just shared. And our editor, Barnell Amos, will take this and put it on the podcast for audio version. So if you like these things, please subscribe and share with others. Maybe you'll inspire a future costume designer who, once Salvador retires, can take Salvador's place. All right, so much. Thanks again, Salvador. I hope we can stay connected, and I will be in touch with you soon. Hopefully, we'll see each other soon.
Okay, you take care.
All right, thanks so much. Everybody else, brave stories change the world, and you are the story. We'll see you later.
Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook at BraveMaker.org. Like, subscribe, and share. To become a monthly donor, text the word BraveMaker to 44321 or go to bravemaker.com/donate. Thanks for tuning in.